mental illness, mental health, taking care of oneself, being in therapy isn't anything that there should be a stigma about.
Well, I agree with you, but many people do feel very shamed. Many people feel that it means that they're crazy or there's something wrong with them. And I would always think when people would say this, like, yeah, you and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, you know what? This people are going to be able to relate to this book because, first of all, therapy, but secondly, even if you've never been or aren't in therapy, therapy is not some mysterious thing for crazy people. It's two
No.
human beings sitting in a room. Only one is on a journey, and the other one is on a journey with you, but
More as a
trained in how
guide.
to listen to you and how to serve as a guide. Exactly.
Welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marcy Brockman, and I am so glad you're here. In this podcast, we engage in meaningful, deeply human conversations using our voices to inspire connection, compassion, understanding, empathy, and wholehearted wellness. I want you to find the courage to transform yourself no matter what others tell you. Only you can give yourself permission to trust yourself, permission to take care of yourself, permission to follow your heart and desires, and build a life of love, home, and belonging. Through sharing our stories, we will help each other to heal and create the healthy, meaningful lives we richly deserve. We only need our own permission to begin. Hello there, and welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marcy Brockman, and I am thrilled that you are here. In today's episode, I had a conversation with Therese Rosenblatt, Ph.D. Therese is a psychologist and a psychoanalyst in private practice in New York with more than 20 years' experience. She treats adults, adolescents, couples, and families. Dr. Rosenblatt is an adjunct clinical professor at Yeshiva University and Pace University in New York. Since the pandemic, she's been running workshops and speaking on the topic of life challenges and emotional health during the pandemic, plus the changing needs of virtual therapy practice. Therese lives in New York City and Westchester with her husband, where she enjoys long visits from her 3 sons and their partners. And her happy place is Martha's Vineyard, which is gorgeous and fabulous. Her new book, called How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age, a Therapist, a Pandemic, and Stories About Coping with Life. It's a very interesting and compelling read. As somebody who is a mental health and therapy advocate, having been in therapy for most of the last, I want to say 30 years, I know the integral importance of the therapeutic relationship between a therapist and a patient and how it has utterly changed my life. And so this book, How Are You? A Connection in a Virtual Age, a Therapist, a Pandemic, and Stories About Coping with Life, Dr. Rosenblatt chronicles how her patients have been handling the pandemic and all virtual therapy and dealing with the loss and loneliness, relationships with partners and parents and children, the work-life balance, challenges with substance abuse and reentry anxiety. And we talked a lot about how the world has changed, how her practice has changed, how my classroom has changed in face of all of the uncertainty and the changes in the pandemic. And she has given us some really logical, sensible, easy to do, actionable advice for dealing with our own anxiety and all of the uncertainty in our current reality. So I hope you enjoy the episode. And please share, please leave us 5-star reviews. I can't stress enough how important this is in getting the audience to grow, in getting Permission to Heal in the eyes, ears, and hearts of a growing listenership as we all struggle in our own way toward healing ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually, psychically. It's all connected, and giving ourselves permission to grow and permission to heal, permission to create healthy boundaries for ourselves without apology is really important to our own growth, happiness, survival, life, etc. So I'm very glad that you're here and hope you continue to be inspired and moved and educated and enlightened by, inspired by this podcast and all of my amazing guests. Thank you so much for being here. The Permission to Heal podcast is sponsored by Instacart. If you're anything like me, no matter how you try to schedule your life, you're always super busy. And when it comes to doing errands and grocery shopping, sometimes we need a little help. Instacart is here to help us get our essentials delivered in as fast as an hour. It is amazing. With Instacart, you can do all your shopping online at your favorite local stores, grocery stores, pharmacies, Target, Costco, Staples, Sephora, Bed Bath & Beyond, 7-Eleven, even some liquor stores. And an Instacart shopper will shop for you. All of my Instacart shoppers have been super helpful in choosing my items. If the store is out of what I've asked for, the shopper will text me pictures of similar items for me to choose from and will change my bill to reflect the changes. Then the shopper delivers my items directly to my door. And you can choose contactless safe delivery. And you can choose contactless delivery, which helps keep everyone healthy and safe. I rely on Instacart for grocery shopping every week and sometimes for even my non-prescription drugstore items. Instacart is like having a personal assistant help me with my shopping every week. Get your groceries and essentials delivered in as fast as an hour via Instacart. New customers can get free delivery on your first order of $10 or more. Just click the link below, which will take you directly to instacart.com so you too can get the help you need. Just click the link below and you can get your groceries and essentials delivered in as fast as an hour via Instacart. New customers can get free delivery on your first order of $10 or more. Instacart.com, your personal and quick shopping assistant. You won't know how you lived without it. Do you like a personal breeze? People are always coming up to me when I have my cell phone fan on and I have this lovely little breeze, keeps my face cool, helps combat hot flashes, makes very little noise, and I have my own little personal breeze. I get these fans, tiny little fans, they don't weigh anything. They come in multiple colors. Each one, so you can see, each one has dual connectors. So you have for an Android phone, and if that's what you have, then you can cut this piece off. But if you have an Apple phone, it has a little connector, snaps into the bottom of your phone, and voila. It does not eat up a lot of the battery juice, but it keeps you cool. These fans save my life. I hot flash all the time, and it's just enough to keep the cool air moving around my face and circumvents the hot flash so I don't get drenched. I cannot recommend these little fans enough. They are amazing. Total time savers. No, these fans are total makeup savers. They're face savers. They're hairdo savers. You know, I sweat under my bangs and then everything gets soaking wet. These fans are amazing. I buy them on Amazon. You get like 5 or 6 to a bundle, and they're inexpensive ways to keep yourself cool. And when you're wearing a mask, it keeps the air around the mask and in the mask a little cooler, so you're not as hot and claustrophobic and so on. So tap on the link below. I'll take you right to Amazon. You can pick up a set yourself. Stay cool, everyone. Okay, so let's just dive in.
Yeah.
Hello, Teresa. How are you today?
I am good, Marcy.
Excellent, excellent.
How are you?
I'm good. It's a Friday. It's toward the end of the summer, although this is going to air in sometime September. So, yeah, it's good. It's good. I like being home. I think we've gotten used to that with the pandemic, you know?
Very, very, very much so. And so one of the things to result from my book is that I've been writing a blog for Psychology Today.
Nice.
And I'm writing about how, particularly my next blog to come out, I'm writing about how the genie is out of the bottle. It can't go back in. Many, many people have discovered that there's another way to live. And I compare it to, that when you first left your parents' home for college or for something else, whatever it was, and suddenly your eyes are open to the way the rest of the world lives, and you realize that your parents' home wasn't the only normal. I sort of feel like that's what's happened with the pandemic. People have realized, whoa, there's another way to live that's really effective, where I can be really productive and also happier and tend more to myself.
Exactly. And not as exhausted and running myself ragged. And there are a lot of things that I just thought I would miss about, and I don't. I miss in some respects seeing people, but at the same time, because I don't know their vaccination opinions or their exposure, etc., I'd rather Zoom with them. It's safer.
Well, I think, first of all, let me just say, I don't want to minimize the losses.
Of course.
And I just want to say that because I want to be real, and I want to acknowledge what everybody's going through. There are real losses, and there's mourning. I think we don't even realize, a lot of us, that we're going through a mourning process. Yeah. That said, for people who haven't lost a loved one or an entire income, I think this has been a tremendous opportunity. And at first I thought it was just me, and I felt a little guilty about it. But then I listened to my patients and my friends and family and people like you who are really getting a lot out of it. And, there's a lot of found time. A lot of people are talking about it as the lost year and a half. I really experience it as found time.
Well, you wrote your book during the pandemic. I wrote and published my books during the pandemic. This podcast was born during the pandemic.
Oh, interesting.
I experienced, because I guess of the extra downtime, and I experienced like a resurgence in my own creativity. Now, because of my anxiety and stress and my own mishigas, I have always naturally self-administered art therapy. That's been my own thing, my meditative, how do we help Marcy be better? So I've been painting more, and I've been drawing more and writing more, and I wrote, so, I did this behind me just a few months ago. I just, for me, that's been one of my ways of coping, because I'm terrified of going back to school. Last school year, I teach public high school, 11th and 12th grade English, and it's a shit show. We're doing our best. Kudos to the teachers and all the people who make the schools function, but the communities are just fighting vehemently, like angry mobs over whether their kids are going to wear masks or not.
First of all, as a group, there are all kinds of people who are suffering in the pandemic, but as a group, I think people with kids at home and and teachers, anybody connected with that, are really suffering the most. And some of these things that they're fighting over may be petty, but some of them are really not. I've been thinking about, is there oxygen deprivation wearing masks? And what does that do, A, to all of our brains? Because I get headaches when I'm wearing a mask a lot. And B, what does it do to a developing brain of a kid? And so I think even sometimes when people are fighting about petty things, they're really fighting about things that are a little deeper. But I also want to pick up on something else you said, which I found to be a very interesting phenomenon, which is what I call the sort of introversion extroversion thing. Right. Is that we, in order to sort of psychically survive through this pandemic, we've been forced to be more introverted. We've been thrown back in on ourselves.
Right.
And a lot of people, very much myself included, have sort of discovered the joys in having a friendship with ourselves and in our own inner resources. You know, you mentioned your arts. For me, it's writing. It's also, you know, it's writing, it's more exercise, it's nature, it's catching up. Believe it or not, catching up on Netflix. I was never a big watcher. I'm getting a lot out of it, you know. So, and I think it's been really hard for extroverts, but I think their only salvation is to learn to, you know, to become more acquainted with their own self.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I sometimes I think felt guilty about, which is my own craziness, I think. I felt a little guilty about the amount of time that I require by myself or in my own home, feeling like, you know, that puritanical work ethic thing, like you're not doing enough, you're not producing enough, you're not. And I think that this whole time gave me permission, not that I needed it, but I learned to give myself permission to take that time and realize that it was self-care, that it's making me a better person, it's making me more relaxed, it's de-stressing, it's, you know, all of that stuff. And I mean, this whole podcast is about giving ourselves permission to listen and to heal ourselves and to learn more about, you know, different modalities of how to make what goes on in and around ourselves healthier, you know.
But, you know, I am fascinated by the fact that so many people are experiencing what you're describing, including the guilt. And so I asked myself, what is it about our culture that we feel guilty doing this kind of self-cultivation, this being with ourselves? And I don't know the answer to that. I do know that our culture really values and emphasizes extroversion and action as opposed to introversion and thought.
Right.
And thinking is really important, and I think it's also very nurturing to have time to think.
Exactly. My first job experiences were working for people who, in very different fields, but who were like, you're only as good as how much you put out during the day. You know, and it was the early 90s. It was the era before email and all of that stuff really took hold. So, you know, I was working in a PR firm, and if the outbox wasn't filled with envelopes and things that were going out, they considered it a wasted day. Like, it could have been a writing day. It could have been a day that we were working on internal things that may have not been billable, or that may have not, you know, created things that were going out. But, you know, a day that outbox isn't full is a day that's wasted, you know, that kind of mentality.
I think, you know, it's interesting because I briefly worked in PR for a while, very briefly. It's not a good match to me.
No, it wasn't
and
for me either.
I think they're one of the industries that are most like that, because I've worked in a number of different fields. And it, you know, as I've become a writer, I've come to realize that a lot of the work of writing has to be inside your head thinking. Right. While you're maybe going about doing other things.
Sure. Yeah. I wrote whole chapters of my book while I was driving. And like, oh my God, that's a great idea. And I would like voice text it into my phone, you know, and then, because sometimes just sitting at the computer it's not where the flow happens. You know,
that's
you see other things that you riff off, other things that you see or hear or feel, and that reminds you of other of things that you want to say. So interesting. Okay, so let's do the 6 quick questions before we get too in depth down this rabbit hole, because I feel like we could talk about this forever. What 6 words would you use to describe yourself?
Oh boy. Oh my gosh. Small.
This is getting to know Teresa.
What?
This is getting to know Teresa.
Yes, small but big. My husband said you're small in size, but a big concept. I like that.
Excellent.
A thinker.
Yeah.
Physical. So it's small, big, thinker, physical. Empathic. A worker.
Sounds great.
Hard worker.
Excellent. What is your favorite way to spend a day?
Um,
And this varies seasonally, I'm sure.
yes. Okay. Well, so since right now I'm in my happy place, which is Martha's Vineyard, let's say a fabulous day would be Martha's Vineyard, great night's sleep, got up, had really good exercise session, and then had several more hours of outdoor activity like biking, swimming, hiking. Hiking is big, with people I love. Oh, and all of this is a combination of alone and with people I love, with good meals, and maybe 2 or 3 hours of satisfying writing.
Wow. That sounds like a great day.
Yeah. And good weather.
Good weather. Maybe some good
Around,
food thrown in. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, food. Food is absolutely that's a must. But healthy good food. Like
Yeah.
sort of in control, not, really unhealthy over the top, but delicious and satisfying
Sure.
with people I love.
What's better than that? I would like that whole day except maybe the hiking. I'm a bit of a klutz. I tripped 2 weeks ago in my own driveway and injured myself. Like, ugh, ridiculous. I didn't even leave my house.
The thing about hiking is that it doesn't require nimbleness or coordination, because it's just a form of walking, really.
Yeah, I know. I used to hike when I was younger.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, that's a whole long story. What is your favorite childhood memory?
So this maybe won't surprise you since I've mentioned all the physicality, but I was seriously into ballet growing up, and took it very intensively, and did a lot of it. And those moments in the ballet studio when things were going well, because when you're not getting it right, it's supremely frustrating. But and when I was young, I had a few girls that were in my class that I hung out with. So those ballet classes and having my friends there and with teachers I loved were with a beautiful music, lots of Chopin being played by a live piano player in the classes.
Wow.
Loved, really loved.
Did you ever see the TV series Bunheads?
No. Oh no. Wow. That's something I'm writing it down.
It's Amy Sherman Palladino show. She did Bunheads right after the Gilmore Girls ended and before she started anything else. It only ran, I think that it was supposed to run for 2 seasons and may have, but I can't find the second season, so I'm not 100% sure they filmed the second season. So it may just be 1 season of shows, but I loved it. And I was only a dancer for like the 3 years or 4 years when I was in elementary school, and then I did other things. Not the most coordinated or graceful. It was graceful in my head, but not in my body, so not my thing. But it's such a good show. You should try to find it. I think it's on, it may be Netflix or Hulu, but Bunheads, it was awesome.
Oh, I definitely will.
Excellent. Okay. What is your favorite meal?
My favorite meal is either lobster or something with eggs, some kind of egg meal with some type of delicious toast and fruit, something fruit-like to go along with it.
So you're a breakfast person.
Yeah, but I'm a breakfast is served all day person.
Ah, yes. I used to do breakfast for dinner when my kids were little sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. They're so easy. I don't love cooking, and they're so easy to cook well, make them delicious.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, number 5. What one piece of advice would you like to give your younger self?
Oh boy, a lot. There isn't one. I've evolved a lot since I was young.
Well, good.
Um,
We're
oh,
supposed to.
yeah. Um, I think the one leading piece of advice would be, it doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter if I'm different from other people and if they object to or don't like my choices.
Mm-hmm.
I should just go ahead and make the choices I want to make that feel right to me, regardless.
I think that's brilliant advice and feeds directly into the whole giving yourself permission thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like sublimated the things that I wanted because I was so busy trying to please my mom, my dad, anybody who was close to me who I wanted to be happy. I felt like it was my job somehow to make them happy and to do everything that I could. So if the story I was telling myself was that what I wanted was opposite of what they wanted, I would do what they wanted without any thought. Like my mom always said, love and relationships take sacrifice. And so I sort of deemed myself as the sacrificial lamb. So
I think our mothers may have been related and, distantly related because I hear you.
yeah,
I can resonate with a lot of that. So can a lot of people. Unfortunately, it tends to be more women than
sure.
men. I don't know what that's about, but whether it's social or innate, but it's true. And if there's one thing that I've learned over the years, it's that old adage of follow your instincts.
Mm-hmm.
Is so, so true. And a lot of people would say, well, my instincts aren't good, so I shouldn't follow them. I would disagree with that. I would say that probably what's happening is there's a lot of static and noise
Mm-hmm.
around your instincts and you're not really
Distracting you.
finding them. Yeah, but if you follow those instincts, and my problem has always been, um, not my instincts, they're good, it's when I don't follow them, and it's sometimes it's that little voice
The second guessing.
that exactly, but the little voice that says, you know you
Mm-hmm.
should rethink this. That's hard to listen to.
Well, it's usually fear. That fear creeping in there. No, you shouldn't. No, there's too many risks. What
mm-hmm.
if you fail? What if it doesn't go as planned?
But what I'm trying to say is there's somewhere in the background is that little voice saying, this isn't good for you, or but what I really want to do is, and we
Okay.
don't trust that.
Sure.
And I think that we need to trust that. And look, I am a psychologist and I am in full-time practice and see a lot of patients. And so, I could jump over to the other side right now and say that yes, there are people who get drawn to things that are not good for them. But when I really listen to them, when they're in my office
Mm-hmm.
and they're really talking freely without fear of judgment or punishment, almost always they'll say, but I knew I shouldn't have.
Sure.
So that good instinct is there. You just have to let it come forward.
Yeah. I entered a whole marriage that way. I was saying to my therapist at the time, I know I shouldn't do this. And he's like, so don't. Go home, pack up, move back in with your parents, and regroup. You don't have to do this. But the wedding plans had already started. We were living together. The families were getting along. My parents and his parents hung out on their own without us. Like, we had made them friends. And there was all this momentum. And I thought, well, maybe I picked all of this series of bad or unhealthy men to be involved with, and now my family loves this family, so maybe they know something I don't, and I should do this. So I did, and it was a disaster. I mean, I got two wonderful kids out of it, whatever,
Yeah.
but it was a disaster for me personally. And
Oh,
afterwards, my family was just like, well, we didn't really like him so much. We were just putting on a face because we knew you liked him. I'm like, well, I misread that situation.
oh boy. Oh boy.
If only we would have spoken to each other about how we actually felt, we could have
Yeah.
circumvented the whole thing.
Oh boy.
So
I'm
funny.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's all a learning curve.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all
Yeah.
good. Nothing's wasted. Okay, number 6. What is the one thing you would most like to change about the world? This is another one there's no one easy answer for.
No, not at all. And I'm so tempted to give a cliche-ridden answer, but here's
World
my
peace.
answer. What?
World peace.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right? We all
Right.
want that. But if I go to, second choice, since everybody would say world peace, I would say I wish people would be more tolerant of differences and diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, diversity meant in the way that it's used every day now about race and religion, but even beyond that, I abhor cancel culture. I wish that there should be room and
Cancel culture?
space. Yeah,
Cancel culture?
yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, cancel culture is if somebody says something that is perceived as being wrong in some way or goes against a certain political group or other groups' beliefs or interests, and people can step into it inadvertently, even using the wrong word, and they get fired, rejected,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
um,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
shamed.
That's rampant everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wish for more viva la difference,
Mm-hmm.
more room for different, for debate, for dialogue, for different opinions, different ways of seeing things,
Right.
different personalities, beliefs, you name it.
I agree. I agree. And I have this perception that some set of years ago it was more tolerant of that. I may be wrong because I was younger and in my own head most of the time, but yeah, I mean, people get up in arms and so upset and not like their listening ears shut off and they can't hear the other person and they might as well just hit end and delete and leave because that's the way their attitude is.
Well, you just
It's hard.
described cancel culture.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know that was what it was called,
Yeah.
but we experience that so much, and I fight against that in my English classrooms with my students, because they hear their parents, they're 16, 17, 18 years old, and they have their own opinions about what they're hearing and experiencing and feeling and so on. And we do debates in class, and it's such a great exercise because they don't know how to acknowledge the opposition, how to treat it intellectually and compassionately and make sense out of it. So I pick a topic and I assign a side, pro or con, to the students, and like, well, I can't argue pro because I feel like I'm against it. Well, it's a good exercise. Learn what the pro person thinks about, and
Well,
feels.
you're No, I mean it sounds like you must be a wonderful teacher and you're giving a gift to your students. Normally, I hear the opposite. I work with people whose kids are I mean it tends in my experience it tends to come more from the private schools.
Mm-hmm.
But kids who I have patients who have kids who hold a certain opinion and take a certain intellectual stance, and they voice it in class, and they've been sort of shamed and canceled because their view doesn't fit in with the prevalent, sort of politically correct view, and any kind of debate or dialogue is shut down.
Yeah, I think that's horrible. Education is supposed
Horrible.
to teach us how to think.
That's right.
It's not supposed to have us think a certain way. We're just supposed to think and
That's
make our
right.
own decisions. Use all the information that
That's
we have
right.
available to us and make a choice or have a thought, an original thought. I always tell them that I would rather whatever their voice is be authentic than for them to write what they think I want to hear, because who the hell wants to read that? I already know how I feel. I don't need 50 people telling me how they think I feel. I want to know how they feel.
I in graduate school, I wrote a paper once, and I took a particular point of view, and I cited a particular writer to back it up. And what I got back from my professor was he was very offended by the position that I took, and it had to do with something personal that was going on in his life. But he approached it intellectually. Not he. I knew about the personal thing. He didn't know I knew, but he gave me an A in the paper, and that made a huge impression on me. And I so respected him for that. That he had such a visceral reaction against my point of view, but could still acknowledge the merits of the work academically.
You had a thesis, you had an argument, you made a case, you backed it up, you had examples. There's nothing wrong with that. That's right. Educational academic argument, you know.
Right.
That was the goal.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, you have to look at it that way. Absolutely. And as a public school teacher, we are we are admonished or reminded not to politicize any of our conversations. You know, we're not supposed to tell them how we vote or what our own political bent is and so on. We're supposed to sort of keep it neutral, which I don't really think is humanly possible. You know, there's always nuances of things in the way we approach topics, but I do my best to make it a safe place for everybody to express whatever their opinions are about things.
But, you know, the way I look at that, because in a way it reminds me of being a therapist, because in order to be a good therapist, I'm not there to impose my values and tastes and proclivities on my patients. It's to help them unfold theirs. But what I've learned, and we talk about in the field a lot, is as a patient gets to know you, they often sense a lot of truisms about you. But I think it's really important to try to be to not impose your views on your students or your patients, just to have that as a goal. Then if they find out or they sense something about you, okay, you don't have to lie and you can talk about it, but you know, at least you're not imposing it on them. You're leaving
of course.
Yeah,
of course. Okay, so let's talk about your book. Let's try that again. I need water. Okay, that's better. Okay, so Teresa, let's talk about your book.
I would love to.
How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age, a Therapist, a Pandemic, and Stories About Coping with Life. I saw this title and I have to read this book. I have to talk to this woman. Everything's changed. I am a person who's a huge advocate of therapy and have been in therapy with 3 different therapists over the last 20 years, but have spent the majority of those 20 years with weekly therapeutic meetings. I never had a strong maternal voice. My mom was bipolar and stuck in her own egoic childhood stuff and an opiate drug addict. So, you know, her opinion wasn't one that I needed in my life. So as I was learning to trust myself and to listen to my own inner voice and to navigate the tumultuous world that was Marcy, I had these 3 amazing therapists in succession, and it has changed significantly since the COVID pandemic. So I was really drawn to this by a lot. So would you give us a little glimpse of who you are and how this book came to be born?
I think it's I'll start with how the book was born. So I was living my life, and I'm in full-time practice of psychotherapy. I work, you know, I have 2 practices, one in New York City and one in Westchester County in New York. And my life was frenetic and whatever. And then, and I was very much of a sort of go out and do person. And suddenly, overnight, I was stuck at home and meeting with all of my patients virtually. They could choose, and they still can choose, between meeting on Zoom, FaceTime, or phone. And my practice is really divided between those 3 modes of meeting. And coming from psychoanalytic therapy, I'm trained as a psychoanalytic psychologist. So there's a tremendous value there in a lot of the really human aspects of the work of being with another person, taking in all the various cues that you get from that person, that they get from you, all the comings and goings of the patient to the office, leaving the office, the separations from one another, the reunions with the therapist, and we use all of that for the meaning that it holds. So suddenly all of that was gone.
Right.
And also, well, here's me, the person. There are many, many reasons why I was drawn to this field, and it really is a field that is just a kind of a perfect fit for me. But one of the many reasons is what a human field it is, and the fact that it's not technological. Right. Excuse me, that I do not have to be sitting in front of a computer all day, which is something I never wanted to do. So here I was suddenly faced with dealing with technology, not being with my patients, and so on. Right. Now, I had always done some virtual work. A patient couldn't come in for whatever reason. We'd meet on the phone, we'd meet on FaceTime. That is very different from meeting exclusively virtually.
Yeah.
And then, and I became kind of enthralled and entranced with this whole transition and what it meant. Then very soon after that, an institute where I teach asked me to make a presentation, and I could choose the topic. And instantly I decided the topic is making it up as we go along. Right. We have no training for how to work this way all the time. We have no theory about it and no technique about how you do this psychoanalytic therapy work virtually.
Right.
So I said, well, that's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to present on, because I was immediately fascinated by it.
And everybody in your field was faced with the same thing at the same time.
Exactly.
Whether you're the therapist or the patient, client.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I made a few presentations on it, and it got me to sort of focus more intently on what was going on, what did this mean for all of us. And so after that, I had done so much thinking, speaking of thinking, and not just thinking, observing. As I was having sessions with patients, I was noting, what was this like for them? What was it like for me? How was it affecting the therapy? How is it affecting us as people? What did it mean for the greater population at large, who are now doing what I call living life online, not just therapy, but we were basically, that's how we were meeting with people. And I thought, I've got to write about this. And I decided, I think I really have something to offer here by writing to the general public, as opposed to just a journal article that only certain people in my field are going to read, because I think this really applies to the whole public. And what I also had in mind as I decided to make it a book for the general public is, so often when I socialize, when I go to parties and meet new people, when they find out what I do, they'll say to me sort of sotto voce, kind of secretly, oh, no one knows, but I don't tell this to people, but I've been seeing a therapist for X amount of time, or I did see a therapist for X amount of time.
And I don't understand why that has to be a side conversation. That's one of the things that we have to keep talking about, all of this stuff, that mental illness, mental health, taking care of oneself, being in therapy isn't anything that there should be a stigma about.
Well, I agree with you, but many people do feel very shamed. Many people feel that it means that they're crazy or there's something wrong with them. And I would always think when people would say this, like, yeah, you and everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, you know what, people are going to be able to relate to this book, because first of all, therapy, but secondly, even if you've never been or aren't in therapy, therapy is not some mysterious thing for crazy people. It's two human beings sitting in a room, only one one is on a journey and the other one is on a journey with you, but
More as
trained
a
in
guide.
how to listen to you and how to serve as a guide. Exactly. And help you identify and clear away the obstacles that are in your path.
Right. Help you see
So,
patterns in your behavior, help call you out on things that you don't normally see yourself, because you're so focused over here, you're not seeing what's right in front of you, kind of thing,
well, and
you
also
know?
the way I'm trained in psychoanalytic therapy is I am trained to listen for the unconscious, and practitioners who are trained like me not only believe in the unconscious, but believe that the unconscious exerts a tremendous influence over our conscious behavior. So one of the ways that I serve as a guide is I'm listening to a whole host of things that the patient is telling me that you may not even hear, or you sort of semi hear, but you're not
Right.
really paying attention to. And there are tons of stories in the book. I wanted it to be engaging. I wanted it to be human. I wanted to talk about what we as therapists do in plain English and make it less mysterious. And so there are lots of stories about patients, very well disguised.
Yes.
Nobody's identity is identifiable. And also stories about myself, which is
It was a
unusual.
nice blend of patient experience and your experience. It was very easy and very engaging, and it
Thank
was a
you.
lovely read. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But most therapists are not writing about themselves. Therapists have strong feelings about that.
Yeah.
And I only wrote about things that I don't mind people knowing. But I thought that um, this whole shift to remote work in the pandemic had could be such a distancer, not being in the room with the
Mm-hmm.
therapist or with the patient, that there was something about revealing a little bit more of myself that felt important in order to sort of bridge these divides created
Yeah.
by technology.
I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. It normally my guess is that your own personal things might get in the way of the therapeutic journey of your patient, but in this case, it added to the connection or solidified the connection that was being weakened by the distance with the technology.
I felt that, and I did it very discerningly. I mean, if you spoke to any of my patients, they'd probably tell you, "Oh, she hardly ever talks about herself."
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very judicious about what I do reveal and what I don't. But I thought for the book, it was certainly important.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people in your profession feel that way. I earlier on in the podcast, I think episode 18, it may have been, I interviewed two Manhattan mental health professionals. One was a psychiatrist and one was a Ph.D. clinical psychologist like yourself. And they chose not to reveal their identity. They didn't even, I know them personally, um, but they didn't even want to reveal their real names. Like I got their first names out of them only. They
Oh,
didn't,
that's interesting.
because they
Huh.
didn't want anything that they might have said in the podcast to reveal more to their patients than they were comfortable revealing. And we were talking about anxiety and how to compensate or how to help ourselves deal with the intense worry and anxiety people were feeling in the middle of the winter last year, early spring of the pandemic, when we really before the vaccines came out and so on. And I was at first slightly annoyed by the amount of anonymity they were requiring, but I felt that what they were saying, the content that they were delivering to my listeners, was more important than what we needed to know, which we ultimately didn't need to know about them in order to get the benefit of their wisdom. So,
Well, I very much respect that because that is my theoretical underpinning. When I'm in a session with a patient, I am rarely talking about myself, but I also think that it's very important that we acknowledge that therapists are real people and
mm-hmm.
profoundly human. And so maybe this is a false distinction, but it's sort of like if you were to run into your therapist in the grocery store, there's a certain fact of reality that you see that they're human. You see in their office how they set up
Right.
their office. And so I sort of decided that what is in my book is also is sort of in that category of, look, I'm a
Sure.
person, this is who I am. I'm not going to introduce that into our therapy sessions, but if you see that about me, then so be it. And that's
Right.
grist for the mill.
Right. Right. The fact that you might go to the grocery store and buy whatever you buy isn't relevant to your client's therapy session, but it is relevant to your humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's incidental, but it's there. I remember my first year teaching, I went grocery shopping at a grocery store right near where the school where I taught. Just this one particular time. I was going someplace else, needed to pick up a few things, and I bumped into a current student at the time, who's probably 35 now, and his mom in the produce aisle. And I happened to just turn to her as another human being and ask, how much broccoli do you think I should buy for this many people? And it turned out to be a student's mother, and he was hiding. Oh my God, she's in the grocery store. Like, well, what do you think? I live in the classroom? Like a jack in the box? Like, it was so funny. He just
But actually,
freaked out.
but I think that's one of the funniest, cutest phenomenons, and almost every kid experiences it when they see their teacher out there. I think they really do sort of imagine that you live in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so I realized, I thought there was also a dynamic when we switched all the therapy to remote, that when when I was meeting with my patients in the office, if they were trying to conjure me up in their mind and remember me, they could always place me in my office.
Which is a safe
Now,
place.
right now on remote, I'm sort of floating in cyberspace,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know where to place me. And that is one of the reasons why I do engage in a little bit more self-disclosure in sessions, even when I judge that it would be helpful to the patient.
Gives them more of a grounding, more of a
More real.
touchstone. Yeah.
Totally,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I had a hard time when my therapist is not computer savvy at all. And so to have her do a FaceTime or a Zoom, forget it. She can barely text. She's hysterical. I adore her. But so we were doing phone sessions, and it was just miserable. I missed her face. From my end, I just missed the energy exchange. I missed seeing her expressions. I just missed her big red couch. Like, I didn't want to sit. I'm in my house or I'm in my car. I'm safe and I'm in my own surroundings, but it's not the same.
So how did you resolve that?
Um, we didn't meet as often. Um, our conversations were shorter, which wasn't so great. Once I was vaccinated and the spring came and she was vaccinated, she had moved her office in the interim of all of this, like coincidental to the pandemic. She was getting rid of the office. She had an office building. She had bought a new house with an office on the side of her house. And so I started going to that home office and sitting there with her. So even that face-to-face was different because it was a whole new physical thing to get used to. And I don't know, whatever. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, and then she has an illness that she's dealing with now, so I haven't seen her in over a month. So she's circling her own wagons for a physical thing for herself. So I'm giving her space. And she's giving patient space. So
Yeah, but anyway, you're saying the visual was very important to
yeah.
you, and it is not equally important to all people. Some people it's very important, others not. Some minority, but still a certain subset of people seem to like the phone better. They like to be able to look the way they want to look and not be seen. And that anonymity gives them the freedom to open up more. So that's
Sure.
been another fascinating journey that I write
Interesting.
about in the book is, yeah. And that's why I give people the choice. I feel equally able to work in all mediums,
Mm-hmm.
but
I
so
like
I
seeing the
follow,
face. I would prefer, even if it's just Zoom or something or FaceTime, I
yeah,
prefer to see the person's face, no matter who it is I'm talking to.
yeah,
It makes
yeah.
I like facial expressions and looking at their eyes. And I think a lot of my own listening comes from lip reading,
Yeah.
even though there's no hearing deficit. And that's why I find teaching with masks on so difficult because I can't see anything. drives me crazy. Anyway, this is not about that. This is about your book. So what do you think? I mean, if you're looking back at all of your clients, your patients, what do you think that the most common threads of stress, anxiety, fear come from people as they're going through this whole COVID experience? It's probably what we're all feeling, but I would like you to give voice to it.
Yeah, I think that the biggest source of anxiety is the uncertainty. And what I found really fascinating is, although people are certainly scared of getting ill and they don't want that, that is not what they're spending their time talking about when they talk about their anxiety. They are talking about uncertainty, the open-endedness of the pandemic. When is it going to end? I can do anything for a certain amount of time, but the open-endedness is hard. Mm-hmm. The gray areas, in a weird way, when we were all in lockdown, pre-vaccination, and we had no decisions to make, there were certainly losses and pressures and stresses and strains. Some people were isolated and alone. Others were suffering from cabin fever and too much being on top of their family. But more than anything, it was once the vaccines rolled out, and we now had choices and decisions and options, and they weren't clear. And now I think we're experiencing a resurface of that, because we also, in addition to the fact that when people were vaccinated, it wasn't clear what we could or couldn't do and so on.
Right.
But then people kind of got acclimated to it, kind of went through this giddy period where they felt freed up and they could go out and do more. And now with the Delta variant, that uncertainty is coming back in.
Yeah.
We don't know how protected we are or we aren't. We don't know when we should or shouldn't wear a mask. That is creating a lot of anxiety. And then connected to that anxiety is a lot of social anxiety. For a lot of people, once they withdrew and they became more isolated at home, they got used to it. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it, but they got used to it. A lot of people found a certain comfort in just focusing more on a smaller group of people, not having to network professionally, be on for colleagues and the boss, going to a cocktail party. All these things are sources of anxiety that people could eliminate. Now they're going out again. And so I think there was also a resurgence of social anxiety.
Sure. And you don't know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't.
Yes.
So now you're socializing with people who you may have known for years, but you don't know if they're safe to be near.
Exactly. And a lot of people feel more comfortable just not even trying and staying at home, or they
staying outside,
or they like to wear a mask, but it's not cool in that setting to wear a mask. And this is all, what I'm calling this gray area, this indecision, is causing really huge amounts of anxiety. And what it's also doing, it's anxiety in and of itself for its own reason, but it's also, and this is what happens with anxiety, it starts to become contagious, so that it stirs up all of our old anxieties.
Sure.
And a lot of people who have difficulty with substances who are battling substance dependency are having a harder time with that again. Mm-hmm. Their old and usual supports to keep them sober are not around.
Right.
So it's digging up a lot.
And the masking does help in the moment alleviate the anxiety. I mean, it does snowball and make it worse and so on. But yeah, I can see how that happens. So what do you tell, what is your advice? What do you tell us who are feeling this way, who are feeling anxious of the uncertainty and don't know what we should do or shouldn't do, and social protocols and so on? What do you tell your patients?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing, I really have actually said a lot about even setting out steps to follow, because people feel so at sea about what do I do and where do I start. The first thing to do is find a source of medical and scientific facts that is a source that you trust. So whether, read, what does the CDC say? Do you like to read the New York Times? Is there a website, a health website? I posted something on Health Thoroughfare where I laid out the steps. What is the source where you get your information that you trust? I actually set up phone consultations with my GP because I think he's a fantastic doctor. I very much trust his advice. And when I get to a certain junction where I'm just like, you know what, I just don't know what to do. Can I have my family over for, Thanksgiving, for Passover, inside, outside, when do I put the mask on, off, whatever? He gives me guidelines. Once you find that source, then try not to obsess over it, follow that. Okay, so get the facts. The next thing you need to do is identify what you are anxious about and how much anxiety you can live with. If you're constantly going to events where you're engaging in behavior that feels risky to you, and then you go home and you can't sleep at night, then identify that as I can do this but not that causes me too much anxiety, and either don't do it or decide on the precautions that make you feel safe. Try not to be apologetic about it, just stick with that. And then be compassionate to yourself about your anxiety. Recognize that this is an inherently anxiety producing situation, and it's okay that you feel it. It's normal. Everyone else is feeling it, even if they're not talking about it.
Yeah.
And do what you need to do to quell your anxiety, or just to live with it. I mean, I'm a little on the more cautious conservative side about mask wearing and distancing. I just come out with it. I tell my friends,
this is what I'm comfortable with, and
I take it on myself. I never point the finger. I respect, everybody else doing what they need to do. I take responsibility on myself. And then finally, and this is more relevant when we're not dealing with the Delta variant, when we're vaccinated and we're in a little bit of a safer period, then kind of set up some steps for yourself, goals that you want to reach. Like maybe your doctor told you that it's safe to go to a small indoor dinner party without masks since everybody's been vaccinated, but yet you just can't quite bring yourself to it. And set that up as your next goal to sort of push yourself a little out of your comfort zone, but only if it's safe. Right now, we're in a less safe period. And so maybe you're not going to push yourself as much, but identify it, own it, and don't be hard on yourself about it. Allow yourself to have it.
Yeah. That's good advice. It's good advice. I found myself in a situation a couple of days ago where I was eating indoors at a restaurant with a group of women who I thought were all vaccinated. And then I found out that two of them weren't, and that they were against it. And, I wasn't going to shove my own opinion down their throat, or even my own, what I think is medical fact that I've learned from the CDC down their throat. It just wasn't what I wanted to do right then and there, but I felt very uncomfortable. So I kind of cut it short and didn't stay.
And allow yourself to do that. Fear gets us to do a lot of things that we might not want to do, or be like, for instance, a lot of people wouldn't have left because they were just too afraid of the social consequences. I think you need to give yourself permission to heal. I think you need to give yourself permission to cut it short if you want. And after going to a couple of indoor restaurant events, I was so uncomfortable afterwards that I'm now very clear with myself and with the people I get together with. I'm not doing indoor restaurants right now. There'll be another day when I'll be able to, but I'm not going to do that right now.
Especially not in restaurants that are allowing full seating. You know, we did done a
Right.
little bit of traveling. We had to drive to Vermont last weekend for my son's delayed May 2020 commencement from college. They did it in August of 21, whatever. But the restaurants weren't crowded. There weren't a lot of people there. They were leaving spaces between tables and they had dividers up still. And I was okay with that. You know, we were in our own little group. We were all vaccinated and it was fine. But I know what you mean. Like, I wouldn't go into, if restaurants were as populated or as crowded as they were prior to COVID, I would not be going in. My husband and I went to the movies a couple of Tuesdays ago, and we were literally the only people in the theater. I was okay with that. It was a
So
private
yeah,
screening.
I go into movie theaters that are not crowded and I wear a mask,
Yeah,
which is probably not even necessary, but then I walk out and I'm not worried. I'm not
exactly.
anxious because I did something that was self-protective. One is allowed to do what you need to do to feel safe and
Yeah,
protected.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's what's going to help us through all of this. It's going to not add to the anxiety. We don't need to be anxious about being anxious. You know, feeling safe and creating healthy boundaries for ourselves and not apologizing for them, I think, are very important takeaways
I
from
think
this.
they're very important. And I think here's where that thinking process comes in. You know, do yourself the favor of thinking through situations
Mm-hmm.
and ones that you feel comfortable with, ones that you don't, and how you're going to approach them. Will you wear a mask? Won't you? If it moves inside, will you go in, from the outdoors? Will you go in? Will you not? So that you're prepared and you're set up for a situation rather than being taken by surprise.
Yeah, right. And then you don't have that anxious, oh my God, what am I going to do moment, because you've already thought about all the contingencies about how you're going to react
And
when
and
such and
then
such happens.
right, and then finally, um, once you make a decision, try not to obsess over it. And this, I think, is the hardest part for people is, the serenity prayer, that basically, I can't paraphrase it, but it says, you know, uh, let go of the thing, control the things that you can control. That's where you put your energy. Let go of the things you can't control. And that's
Mm-hmm.
hard for people because they say, but what if I get sick? Well, you know what?
You'll
There
deal
is
with
a
it then.
certain amount of lack of control in our lives that we must accept.
Right. Right.
So
We're
do
not
as much as you can and let the rest go.
brilliant advice about anything, really.
About
About
anything.
anything. You could apply that to everything in your life. Do what you can and let the rest go.
Well, we before COVID, we had an illusion of
Mm-hmm.
certainty. We had
Wait, we're breaking up. Service is slowing down. Let's
oh,
try that again.
can you hear me
Before,
now?
I can hear you now. Before the pandemic, we had an illusion of control, is where you were.
Right, right. But we didn't. We actually didn't have control. We over certain things. We
Right.
actually didn't. We could cross the street, get hit by a car, get cancer. You know. So what the pandemic has done is it's driven home to us where we don't have control, and that
Mm-hmm.
is very uncomfortable for people. So again, direct your energies to what you can control and try to let go of the rest. Try to not obsess over what you simply, anxiety is not going to help you control something.
No, no, no. And I'm trying to figure out, like, we went through a whole school year last year of mask wearing and social distancing and keeping classroom doors and windows open, and we tried the virtual thing, so we were combining virtual with in person. We had cohorts going different days of the week. It was a chaotic, crazy mess of moving blocks. And by the end of the year, we had everybody in person with the exception of the few that remained virtual, still mask wearing, still social distancing, still with the doors and the windows open. And I think when we left in June, we were anticipating a more normal autumn. But now, because of the slowdown in vaccinations and the Delta variant and the increase increased number of young people being infected, et cetera, et cetera. I think I haven't heard officially 10 days out from the beginning of the year, and I have no idea what it's going to look like. But I think we're going to be still doing social distancing and mask wearing again. And I don't know if the school district is going to allow virtual or if it's all going to be in person. I don't know. 12 and up can get vaccinated, but although New York is a very blue state, Long Island is very red and has a very anti-vax kind of opinion about things. So I'm nervous. I've been vaccinated, but I'm asthmatic, and I had COVID, wasn't confirmed because it was before testing. It was very early March of 2020 when there weren't COVID tests around, but right. I had every single symptom. Could it have been the flu? Sure. But to me, it seems too coincidental that every single symptom I had. So anyway, I don't know, how do people cope with 10-year-old kids who they have to send to public school, who can't get vaccinated, who are there's so much uncertainty and abject fear.
I just have to say again, my heart so goes out to you, all teachers and all students, young students, because I think you are in the hardest position. They're really, right now, hopefully there are armies of people studying these situations who maybe at some point will come up with better approaches. But right now, there doesn't seem to be one right answer.
No. And I think it's getting to all of us. I think it's hard to.
It's hard for it.
I'm meditating and I'm writing and I'm really in touch with how I feel about things and doing your suggestion. I'm trying to figure out what my own plan is going to be going forward. I'm obviously going to wear my masks and keep myself separate from people, but like, where am I going to congregate with others and what's my situation? Trying to get a handle on the things that I can control in a sea of things that I can't control. And
well, maybe another way also to think about it is don't let the best be the enemy of the good. I think that it must be tremendously difficult to teach kids with a mask on. But if for a certain amount of time before we get a handle on the Delta variant, that's what you need to do in order to stay safe, then that's what you need to do. And right. Is it the best? And I'll say, even for therapy, as much as I write about how to adapt remote therapy to make it work and to adapt to our situation now, I don't deny that the gold standard is still in person. And for teaching, the gold standard is still in person without a mask. But if you can't, you can't. And you just have to make the best out of, I always say, reality is your friend. Figure out what the reality is. If it's not safe to be in a classroom unmasked, then you can't be unmasked.
Right. Exactly. And as you said, the gold standard is face-to-face, no masks. We can see each other. We can read each other's expressions. We can read each other's body language. That's the gold standard. But we can't do that and maintain our own physical safety. So give that up for now. And let's try to make the best lemonade with these lemons that we can.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, just as an aside, at the end of each school year, as I'm signing yearbooks, because I teach, most of my students are seniors, when I sign their yearbooks, the fee for me signing their yearbooks is that they take a selfie with me. And then I have on my wall pictures of myself with all of my students, which I love looking at. And so we did that this year. We did the yearbook signing outside. And so people were taking their masks off to do the selfies and then putting their masks back on if that's what they chose. And I just had the pictures developed and I don't recognize my students. I have to look at them and cover their faces under their eyes to know, oh, that's so-and-so. Like I didn't know what they looked like.
So that's something that I didn't write about, that I've been thinking about more since the book, I finished the book, which is, a lot of people find the eyes to be the most important compelling part of the face.
Right.
I am somebody who is more compelled by what's beneath the nose, by the mouth.
Right.
And so I've been
The many
fascinated to
expressions of
see
someone's mouth. Yeah.
that if somebody has their mask on, it can be difficult to recognize them by the eyes alone. I
Mm-hmm.
really need the mouth more than anything.
Right.
So yeah, that's a whole other,
It's
facet.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not just the hearing, it's not just the auditory, but the visual, seeing what their facial expressions are and what their mouth looks like when they're speaking, to me, is part of understanding the content of what they're saying. So it's been very interesting to learn how to rely more on the auditory alone.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Very peculiar.
Yes.
Okay, so let's tie this up with a little bit of Therese Rosenblatt wisdom.
More? You mean
More,
I haven't
more.
given
I'm
you
hungry for it, baby.
I haven't given you enough wisdom?
Enough. Do you have any last bit of advice for the listeners before we depart, as to self care or self therapy or anything?
Maybe it has to do with what I just said about reality is your friend. We're all suffering through this to varying degrees, some people more than others. And I think, as I just said, that you as a teacher maybe are suffering more than, me as a therapist. But we're all suffering. There's losses and fears for all of us. And I think that, in this reality is your friend thing, um, there's no truth that says that we shouldn't have a pandemic. A pandemic has been part of human history for
Yeah.
the millennia, and this is part of life. This is part of life. Bad things happen. They do. There are wars, there are pandemics, there are droughts, there are all kinds of terrible climate change.
Right. This is our
And
physical, biological reality.
that's right. And I think that the best way to find peace is to acknowledge our reality, to accept it,
Mm-hmm.
to not tell ourselves this shouldn't be, we don't deserve this. We do. This is part of the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And once you accept what the reality is, then you can adapt to it, then you can adjust to it. Do what you need to do to name the reality, accept it, adapt to it. What are you going to do to adapt? What are you going to do to adjust? And how are you going to make it work as well as possible? That is one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Would I rather see my patients in person and them meet? Absolutely.
Sure.
I wish I were sitting in my office with them, but that can't be for right now. So I'm constantly thinking about how can I make this therapy work remotely, because that is the reality. And then I'm also thinking about what is the silver lining? What am I and what are they getting out of not having to transport ourselves to the office, having more time to ourselves, having more time at home? It has opened up worlds for many people.
Sure.
And you can say, I'm an extrovert, this is too hard. Okay, but every extrovert has an introverted side. Every extrovert has an internal life. How can I tap into that internal life, make friends with it, and make, as you said, make lemonade out of lemons?
Right. Beautiful. Well, how do we find your book? Is it for sale online and bookstores and so on?
It is. It's on Amazon, and
Mm-hmm.
so if you just plug in, how are you? Connection in a virtual age, a therapist, a pandemic, and stories about coping with life, it will come up. It will probably come up if you plug in my name, Therese Rosenblatt, Ph.D.
Right.
I'm on LinkedIn. I write a Psychology Today blog, which always mentions the book.
Nice. Okay, so all of the links to all of these things will be in the show notes. So if you're listening or watching, just scroll down under where you're seeing or watching, and it will all be there. Thank you so much for Teresa for being here. This was really wonderful. I enjoyed this conversation a lot.
Thank you very much for having me, Marcy. I enjoyed it too.
Good.
And I appreciate your having me.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
Well, thanks to all of you who support this show on Patreon. You keep Permission to Heal up and running. If you want to become a valued patron, please go to www.patreon.com/permission to heal. That's www.patreon.com/permission to heal. After we pay expenses, 25% goes to scholarships at the Karen Treatment Centers to transform lives impacted by addiction. Your support is contributing directly to helping people and their families transform and heal from addiction. This is a cause very close to my heart, as my mother died of the effects of opiate addiction, and it tore my family to pieces. Thank you so much for supporting Permission to Heal and my mission to support others through their healing journey, through addiction, through Karen Treatment Centers. You are vital to our success. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Permission to Heal. I hope you found it moving and inspirational. Please remember, you don't need anyone else's permission to trust and follow your heart. You have the power within you. Subscribe to Permission to Heal so you don't miss any new episodes, and please share this with your friends.